you guys for taking time out to be here today. I really appreciate it. Andrew, thank you for your kind introduction. And let me say right off the bat, on an issue of the utmost importance to our nation, congratulations on going to the Rose Bowl. It's great to be with you guys, and I wanted to share a few thoughts with you, and then I'd like to do questions and answers. And if you have answers, I'd really like to hear from you first, because I am on a search for answers. Look, let's begin, because I know your time's valuable. My name is Martin O'Malley. I am not a former independent. I am not a former socialist. I am not a former Republican. I am a lifelong Democrat. I'm running for President of the United States. I intend to win, and I need your help. And I wanted to share a little bit with you about my background. I know that I am one of the, how shall we say it, one of the newer faces on our national horizon, at least in the presidential context. So let me share a little bit with you about my story. And most importantly, let me talk to you about our story, the story that we share as Americans, that we have the ability and the responsibility and the opportunity to advance in this election. I was born one of 6 kids to Tom and Barbara O'Malley, 2 of the most generous people that God ever put on the planet. And they taught all of us, not like your own parents probably have taught you, to love God, to love our country, to love our family. And they also taught me something else, though, that I didn't realize was not standard fare around every kitchen table in America. They taught me the public service. Public service and politics is actually a noble and honorable service to others. And they encouraged each of us to be involved. After college, I moved to Baltimore, land of the free, home of the brave, birthplace of the Star-Spangled Banner. Graduated from University of Maryland Law School there. Became a prosecutor in the Western District of Baltimore. You ever see the show The Wire, The Corner, and these things that sadly portrayed the degree to which Baltimore had allowed herself to become the most violent, addicted, and abandoned city in America. And I was a prosecutor. I would go in with 80 cases under my arm and do my best to do justice in 5 hours of court time. Partly born out of that frustration, I ran for state senate in 1990. My girlfriend at the time, now my wife, told me when I ran as a 27-year-old kid against the chairman of the city senators that guy's going to beat you like a drum. Well, he didn't beat me like a drum, but they say I lost by 22 votes on the absentee ballots. Not that I remember. And then the next year I ran for city council when there was an opening on the city council. I hadn't intended to go in that direction. But I gave my best energies that I possibly could in those 8 years. And by 1999 was getting ready to get out of politics altogether, when nobody who could turn our city around would actually step up and run. And so I said to Katie, you got to let me try, because I can't not try. Because I know that if I don't try, knowing the other people in this race, that hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of guys are going to die violent deaths. And I can't live with myself if I don't try. So I tried, and I succeeded. And we ran a campaign about the larger issues that all of us care about justice and injustice, and we put our city on a path for the biggest reduction in crime of any major city in America. And every single day, it was hard. And every single day, we had conversations about criminal justice and race in America. And yet, we saved a lot of lives. Didn't make my city immune from setbacks, but we did save a lot of lives. In 2006, I ran for governor and defeated, in that year, the only Republican incumbent who was defeated. And no sooner had I taken office than it seemed that our country was hit by the worst recession that we'd seen since the Great Depression. Other governors, like our party often does, we put forward a new leader in Barack Obama to move us forward, and that's exactly what he did. And every governor in America had an opportunity to decide whether they were going to be part of the problem or whether they were going to be part of the solution. Instead of trying to cut our way to prosperity, we instead invested more in public education. Memo to Governor Branstad. We increased education funding by 37%. We made our public schools the best in America 5 years in a row, something we never accomplished during tougher times. We went 4 years in a row without a penny's increase to college tuition. Actions, not words. We were the first state in the Union to pass a living wage. We raised the minimum wage. We raised our goals for minority and women business participation to the highest in the country, and we exceeded them in a recession. It's about actions, not words. We passed marriage equality. We passed the DREAM Act. We brought people together after the slaughter of all those innocent kids in that Connecticut classroom, and we passed comprehensive gun safety legislation with a ban on combat assault weapons. And if there was a thread that ran through all of those actions, it is the thread of including people more fully in the economic, social, and political life of our state. And I'll be darned, doing what's right and doing what's just is also good for business. Get this, a faster rate of job creation because we invested more in infrastructure of all sorts, rural broadband, water, wastewater, transportation infrastructure. We created a faster rate of job growth coming out of the recession than our neighbors in Pennsylvania or Virginia. We defended not only a AAA bond rating all the way through the recession, but we also defended the highest median income in America all through the recession and the second highest median income for African American families. It was all about including more people more fully in the economic life of our state. Because the freedom in Exodus is not merely a freedom from oppression, right? It's a freedom for full participation. So what does that have to do with our country in the here and now? I believe a great deal. Because the two phrases I hear everywhere I go across our country are the phrases new leadership and getting things done. No people ever gave their children a future with more opportunity by making their nation weaker or by dismantling their government. We need to get things done as a people. It's how we've always found a way forward. And we've been through divided times before, and yes, we're going through a very divided time now. But we've come through it with new leadership and an ability to actually get things done. My wife Katie and I have 4 kids. 2 boys, 2 girls. Rich people couldn't do that. And my oldest daughter is 24 years old, and she is a first grade teacher at Walter P. Carter Elementary School now. She's in her 3rd year as a first-year teacher. Any teachers here in the audience? Always got one. God bless you. Thank you for being a teacher. So my daughter returned to her first-grade classroom. Adorable 100% African-American kids, eager and ready to learn. And she went there the weekend after her dad had announced for president. And there was a buzz in the classroom. And a little girl tugged her on the sleeve named Sabina. She said, Miss O'Malley, I'm not so sure about this idea of your father running for president. Because quite frankly, I kind of like Barack Obama. Well, a lot of us like Barack Obama. Right? We elected a president, not a magician. We elected a president. Faced with our country on the verge of being plunged into a second Great Depression, and on the heels of 30 years of bad, trickle-down, exclusive economic policies, President Obama has made the best decisions possible to move our country forward. And here's the good news and the bad news that we need to own if we're going to build upon the work of the Obama-Biden administration. The good news is, thanks to his leadership and the leadership of Americans throughout our country, we have now created 69 months in a row of positive month-over-month job growth. That's the very good news. We're the only species on the planet without full employment. So jobs are important, right? No progress without jobs. The tough news of our times, though, is this. 70% of us are earning the same or less than we were 12 years ago. And that's the first time that's happened this side of World War II. So when you ask people, even with the progress our nation has made, if they feel confident that they'll be able to give their children and grandchildren a future with more opportunity than they've enjoyed, people kind of put their hands in their pockets. They look down at their shoes. And it doesn't need to be this way. Look, we are Americans. We make our own future. We make our own destiny. And there is no people that ever gathered together to form a republic in the history of this planet who were better at solving problems and bringing innovation and new thinking to our challenges than we are. So let us get up for greatness. Our challenges are huge, but not larger than we are. And the good news is, we need only return to our true selves and remember that our economy is not money. It is people. It is all of our people. And with that in mind, I believe that there's sort of three main things we need to do in order to make wages go up again and not down, in order to give you guys more opportunities so that you can give your kids and grandkids more opportunities when you graduate and go on in life. And I have put forward 15 strategic goals to move our country forward. I believe that the difference between a goal and a dream is a deadline. That's right. The difference between a goal and a dream is a deadline. So each of these goals, I've put a timeline on them. To cut gun deaths in half in the next 10 years, to eradicate childhood hunger in the next 5 years, to cut youth unemployment in half in the next 3 by making national service a universal option for all Americans who should so choose. But they fall into basically 3 areas. Look, I believe that we need to restore common sense wage and labor policies back to our economic decisions. Secondly, we need to make the investments in our own country that only we can make. And third, we need to square our shoulders to the great challenges of our times and make them our opportunities. Let me go through each of those briefly, and then let's open it up here. What do I mean by common sense wage and labor policies? I mean that since 1947, Democrats and Republicans alike always came together, understanding that no one who works hard in our country should have to raise their children in poverty. And so we always raised the minimum wage to keep it above the poverty line. So yes, I believe we should raise the minimum wage and raise it to $15 an hour, however we can, wherever we can. I believe we should pay overtime pay for overtime work. I believe we should pay equal pay for equal work for men and women and make that promise a reality finally in our country. We should expand paid family leave so that young moms and dads can fully participate in the economic life of our country. I believe that we should make it easier and not harder for people to join labor unions and bargain collectively for better wages. I believe that if we want wages to go up and not down, we should get 11 million of our neighbors out of the underground, off-the-books shadow economy by passing comprehensive immigration reform with a pathway to citizenship for all of our neighbors. And there are other things we need to do as well, like expanding Social Security and not cutting it, and being willing to pay for it so our seniors don't retire into a lifetime of poverty. Second big category, investments in our own country. You know, the people of China and the people of India, they have nations of their own to invest in. We need to make the investments just like our parents and grandparents did. Great nations do not store up legacy wealth or create generational opportunity by locking cash in a closet, do we? We invest in common goods, things that pay dividends and returns over the generations. What are they? Investments in research and development, new cures, new solutions to human problems. Investments in our infrastructure. Our roads, our bridges, our tunnels, increasingly now our cyber infrastructure, which is kind of the superhighway of the global economy. And the other big investment we've made every generation, investments in the brain power of our kids. In other words, part of our genius, that formula of actions that include more people more fully, is that every generation we educate at higher and better levels in terms of their skills so that they can be winners in a changing economy. The economy is always changing. The question is whether we have the will to change in advance of it and to harness these changes for the good of our kids, to give them the skills they need. Look how far the pendulum swung in one lifetime. I'll be the center of that swing, okay? My dad went to college on a GI Bill after flying 33 missions over Japan in a B-24 Liberator. I went to college almost debt-free, paid it off in just a couple of years. My daughters went to college, not on a GI Bill, but they graduated with a mountain of bills. We were proud of them on graduation day, and by golly, we're going to be proud of them every month for the rest of our natural lives.
Yeah.
We're the only nation on the planet now that does this to our kids, you know. We're the only developed nation on the planet that saddles our kids with a lifetime of debt as soon as they graduate. It doesn't need to be that way. It was not so long ago that it wasn't that way. So I have put forward a plan to move us to debt-free college again is a reality in the United States within the next 5 years. And unlike the other two candidates, I actually have some experience because our state did a better job than any state through the recession at holding down the cost of college education. That plan is online. It's martino'malley.com, and there's a plan to pay for it as well. Third, the great challenges of our time. I want, when we get into questions and answers, I want you to feel free to ask me any question you like. On ISIL, on America's role in the world, or any of the other things that are on your mind. I believe that there are a couple of great challenges that we face right now. And one of them is the challenge of climate change.
Yes.
The greatest. Climate change is the greatest business opportunity to come to the United States of America in 100 years. I am the first candidate in our party, let's hope not the last, but I'm the first anyway, to put forward a plan to move us to a 100% clean electric grid by 2050. And create 5 million jobs along the way. And the great thing about talking about this in Iowa is that you're already on your way. I mean, 30% of your electricity now comes from clean Iowa wind. And the big component parts you see rumbling down your highways, the great thing about the big parts on those windmills is that they're too damn big for it to make any sense to import them from China. So you build them yourself. 4,000 people are employed in an industry that did not exist 15 years ago. Imagine what we could do if, as a nation, our president, as I plan to do, would sign the executive order that makes this a top national security and economic priority. Landing a man on the moon did not happen within all of the above strategy. It was intentional, right? It was an engineering challenge. And so too is this. The second challenge I want to talk with you about, now before I stop talking and start listening, is the changing nature of conflict and warfare in our world. I was the mayor of a big American city that was at the epicenter, right smack dab in the middle of the 3 attacks that took place on September 11th. To our west, Flight 93 went down in a cornfield just over the Maryland border with Pennsylvania. To our north, the attacks on the World Trade Towers in New York. And to our south, where a lot of Marylanders died, the attacks on the Pentagon. On that day, I decided that I, as a mayor, would make my city a leader in homeland security and preparedness. And so we assembled our own security cabinet. We took stock of our vulnerabilities, and most importantly, we took actions to be more prepared because we knew that this was a whole new era. And the likelihood was that there would be second and third and later rounds of attacks. And I wanted our city to be among the most prepared and not the least. Because of the actions we were taking in my own city, my colleagues, Democrats and Republicans, made me their leader on Homeland Security and Preparedness and the task force set up by the U.S. Conference of Mayors, a post that they elected me to every year thereafter that I served as mayor. And then as a governor, my colleagues, Democratic and Republican men and women serving as governors across the country, made me always, every year, one of their 2 leaders on Homeland Security and Preparedness. The President of the United States appointed me to be the Democratic co-chair of the Council of Governors, whose job by act of Congress it is to meet with the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of Homeland Security on a regular basis for protection, for matters involving protection of the homeland. So let me share a couple thoughts with you in a little greater depth about what we need to be doing in this new era of conflict. Conflict in the 21st century is very different from conflict in the 20th century. When we defeat ISIL, as we will, there will not be a signing ceremony on the deck of the USS Missouri. The age of nation-state conflicts, where large standing armies square off on a battlefield or over a theater of war, that was 20th century conflict. This is 21st century conflict. It is a multi-dimensional chessboard played out not only in theaters like Syria and Iraq, where a vacuum was created, in part because of our lack of forward thinking, but it's also played out in France. It's played out in the downing of that Russian airliner. It's played out in Beirut. It's played out in San Bernardino, California, and will no doubt play out in other places as well. And we need to take, President spoke the other night and about a number of important things. One is that we not allow these sorts of terror attacks to claim as their first victories the loss of our American values. Democracies are very vulnerable when they are attacked to the sort of unscrupulous and opportunistic scapegoating language and actions of demagogues, like the language that we have heard from Donald Trump about making all of our Muslim neighbors carry ID cards, or now worse, yesterday, wanting to close off our borders and eliminate the possibility of travel for Muslim American neighbors. And who's he going to start with? All of those men and women of the Muslim faith that serve in our armed forces, patriotic Americans on the front lines there. Who's going to be next? Is it the Doctors Without Borders, many of whom are Muslim Americans that are the face of our nation all around this planet, or engineers? So as individual citizens, we have to make sure that we are pushing back against that sort of rhetoric, against that sort of language. It makes all of us more vulnerable, at home and abroad. And it plays right into the hands of ISIL. Our Muslim American neighbors are on the front lines of this new type of conflict. We need them, and we need each other if we're going to come through this. But there's also a role that every governor and every mayor, and yes, our federal government also has to play. And that is in improving our ability to prepare, to respond, and to be more resilient in the face of these sort of attacks. We have become far more resilient than we were on September 11th. Could you imagine what the state of, the sort of, many of you remember those times. You remember how all of us were wondering, when's the second shoe going to drop? An attack like the one that took place at San Bernardino would have had a much more devastating impact on us if it had happened 3 weeks after the attacks of September 11th, right? So we have become more resilient, but there's still a long way we need to go to become more prepared. In this age of biology, I think probably the best metaphor that I have heard is that defending the homeland and preparing against these sort of attacks, becoming more resilient in the face of these attacks, is like the immune system of your own body. Your immune system is strong not because it outnumbers the other all the bad germs in the world. It's strong because it's better connected. It's strong because it is better coordinated, because it adapts more quickly to the invasion than the germs can in attacking your body. And that's what we need to do here in the homeland. Sadly, since the attacks of September 11th, the federal grants for homeland security and preparedness, the ability that we used to give to states and cities to up their defenses, those grants have been cut by 2/3. The threat hasn't been diminished by 2/3, but the grants have been cut by 2/3. I believe that there are essentially 12 core capacities that we need to constantly improve and update as in the homeland here. And one of them is our ability to assemble intelligence, to connect the dots, and to understand the connections between the connections that allows us to thwart these attacks. Every state should have a state infusion center, an intelligence sharing, an intelligence gathering capacity. But if you examine the continuum of those state fusion centers, some of them are very highly functioning, others are barely functioning. Sort of a flat screen TV and a couple of light duty officers watching the CNN feeds. I'll bet you can't find 2 governors in the United States that could tell you who the top 3 most lethal murder gangs in their own state are, let alone who the sleeper cells might be on terrorist watch lists. So we have a long way to go to better assemble and that sort of intelligence. In a shocking admission, some of the French officials after the attacks of Paris said they have nowhere near the sort of detective and intelligence analysts that they need in order to keep pace with this threat and stay on the inside turning radius of this new sort of metastasizing adaptive threat that's out there. In fact, I think President Hollande said that he was going to double the size of their detective and intelligence analysts, which means, I guess, an admission that they only have half as many as they think they need, right? We need to be going through and asking these same questions, not only on our fusion centers and our intelligence capacity, but on the network capacity of our camera networks, their ability to have face recognition, license plate recognition, our ability to detect a bio attack by having a biosurveillance system in place that's actually timely and operable. Our ability to dispatch bomb squads where we need to in a timely fashion. We used to worry about police and used to worry about fire protection. We need to worry about, and rather than worry, take action to fill those gaps as well. And we need to be at the forefront of this, constantly reassessing our vulnerabilities. I mean, how much sense does it make that we would be the only state, or only country, among developed democracies, where it is so very easy for anyone to buy combat assault weapons and cop killer bullets? Why does that make any sense? It didn't make any sense in the last century. It certainly is irresponsible in this age of asymmetrical warfare and terror attacks. Look, those are a few thoughts for you. And lest you get down about these challenges, know this. Our country has been through great challenges before. And we will come through this challenge as well. Of that I have no doubt. And the most important thing that allows us to come through these challenges is our values, our appreciation of what we have in one another, our ability to think not only rationally, but also compassionately about our role in this world. I truly believe that we are standing at the threshold of a new era of American progress. And for all of you who sometimes lose heart because we look at our national government and how it's not functioning, sometimes our Congress seems like it's closing down every quarter, right? I encourage you to do as I do and talk to our young people under 30. Because you will rarely find among their number young people that want to deny climate change or think that it's not real. You'll rarely find young people under 30 that want to slam America's door in the face of Syrian refugees that are fleeing genocide. Nor will you find among young Americans under 30 many people that want to deny rights to gay couples or bash new American immigrants. So all of that tells me we are actually moving to a much more compassionate, much more generous, and much more connected place. We have only the need of new leadership to put forward for these changing times that will bring us together in order to move us forward. I need your help here in Iowa for all of the fretting that goes on about the influence of big money and polls and the influence of big banks in this world. Here in Iowa, every individual person matters. And I know, because I know that so many of you insist on meeting us, those of us that are running for president, 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 times before you make up your mind. Or when you make up your mind, you make it up based on your judgment of what's best for our country. And that's what keeps me going. Look, there are 3 candidates in this race for the Democratic Party's nomination. Only one of us has 15 years of executive experience bringing people together to actually get things done. It's fine to be a voice for change. It's another thing to accomplish change. And I need your help. Yes, sir, in the back, in the green. Question and answer time. I hope you have an answer.
I have a question. Sorry. We've been a few times. I want to talk to you about publicly financed elections.
Sure. Tell me your name again.
My name is Mason.
Mason.
I want to talk about publicly financed elections. So you come out in support of publicly financed elections. I want to know if you can commit in your first 100 days to make this a priority. And I want to know a little bit more about what your plan is.
Sure. Thank you. One of the 15 goals that I've set is to move us to publicly financed congressional elections within the next 5 years. There's already a vehicle for this. In fact, it's introduced lead sponsor in the House. It's a man named John Sarbanes, one of my neighbors, fellow Marylander. And so I believe that we can get this done, and I intend to get this done within the next 5 years. I intend to talk about it all the time. In addition to publicly financed elections, I would also like to, and I think we should probably even increase the match to what's conceived of in the Sarbanes bill. And this is how I intend to sell it. I intend to go to members of Congress, Democrats and Republicans alike, and ask them, do you enjoy being a telemarketer for 20 hours a week? Wouldn't you like to be able to talk and listen to your constituents instead of dialing for dollars? Self-interest. Self-interest. I also believe that we need to move to bipartisan redistricting commissions, like you guys have here. I also think that instead of the chair of the DNC trying to limit presidential debates, a much more democratic function would be for us to work to pass in every state a constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United and a constitutional amendment to make the right to vote a constitutional right. And right now it's not. And that I think having that conversation would help us to push back against those governors, mostly Republicans, who try to put barriers in place to keep people from voting. Great question. Next one. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Dina. I was wondering what your thoughts about HIV criminalization laws.
Yeah, I'm guided in, I believe in science. And therefore I take the advice from public health docs about what works. And in terms of criminalizing HIV, I think it drives the problem underground. And I think it's not helpful to protecting the common good we share from a virulent disease. So I would be opposed to those laws that, in a moment of fear, sought to criminalize HIV. Yes, sir.
You talked a lot about the security of our nation, and some would say nuclear weapons are a big part of that. You previously said that you want to live in a world without nuclear weapons, and one first step would be to eliminating the U.S. and Russia arsenal. Would you be in favor of limiting it by 1,000 weapons each?
Yeah, I don't know that I can put a number on it, but I do know that we need to be a leader in this world when it comes to reducing the threat of nuclear weapons and nuclear arsenals. There's probably other things we need to do more of in our defense, like cybersecurity. So I think our nation's our security needs need to be guided not by sequester limits, but by what we need to actually do as a nation to defend ourselves here. And my hope would be that we could modernize at the same time that we reduce our nuclear arsenal and be an example and lead the world in doing the same, re-engage the Russians in reducing theirs as well. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, about 40% of the people in our prisons are probation, parole, and work release violations. And that's costing us an enormous amount of money. And I believe you have something to say about that, because you said you were able to reduce the recidivism rate in Maryland. Could you tell us how you did that?
Sure. Yes, sir. Thank you. During my time as governor, we reduced our violent crime rate to 30-year lows, and we reduced our incarceration rate to 20-year lows. And we achieved a 15% reduction in recidivism, which I believe is the largest of any of the states in the United States during that 8-year period of time. In essence, this is how we did it. I've been on a constant search from this first days walking into the district court and to this day for the things that actually work in public safety to save and redeem lives, and also a search for the things that don't work. And so in an entrepreneurial way, I believe we should dial up the things that work and stop doing the things that don't work. So on the score of things that don't work, I decriminalized the possession of small amounts of marijuana, and I also repealed the death penalty in the state of Maryland.
Yay.
On the category of things that do work, we found that actually dialing up programs and the effectiveness of programs inside our prisons work. And so we made sure that our drug treatment slots were filled. We took greater actions in terms of reentry. Some of them were very common sense things, like making sure inmates, before they're discharged at the end of their sentence, actually have an ID card so they can apply for services and make their way in the world. The other thing that we learned by doing is the effectiveness of bringing groups inside our prison to facilitate some reconciliation between prisoners and oftentimes estranged family members who they haven't talked to in years and years, so that they have some place to land and some home to go to when they come out of prison, instead of going back to the same old crowd or sleeping under bridges or breaking into cars in order to feed themselves. We also did a whole lot of restorative justice work that we hadn't done before with our prisons. We used inmate labor to plant 1 million trees to improve the health of the waters of the Chesapeake Bay. We used inmate labor to glean farmers' fields for food for the Maryland Food Bank to feed the hungry. We used inmate labor to help us in our effort to turn the corner away from hunter-gatherer oysters to oyster aquaculture, which also replenishes the Chesapeake Bay. Inmates made the cages for that. So all of these things were about connecting to the broader society and connecting to the other living systems of our state. And I believe all of those things together were helpful in reducing that recidivism rate. And then there was one other thing that we did, and that is to use our experience and use the big data to better assess who's truly a risk for harming other human beings again and who's not. And so we used to supervise so many people on parole and probation that we really supervised nobody at all. So instead, we used the history of we modernized our criminal justice database, and we looked at the history, and we identified the fact that when people do commit another crime, it's usually within their first 6 months out. And so we focused our supervisory efforts on those first 6 months. We identified the 2,000 people that we called the VPI parolees or probationers, the Violence Prevention Initiative, and we supervised them very, very tightly. And we did do our best to put them back in the second they reoffended or violated their probation. But a lot of the other people, we put them on a less strict regimen for reporting, and it seemed to work. That's a good question. Let's get a woman here. Yes?
Oh, hi. I'm Mary Matthew Wilson. I have a question about what your plans are for engaging younger people, or maybe even people coming out of the corrections system, in career and technical education. Over the years, we've heard a lot about this. I remember hearing the former governor of Virginia once, I think it was in his inaugural speech, talk about the fact that we needed to learn to value plumbers and electricians as much as we do our doctors and our lawyers. I also remember when President Obama talked a lot about green-collar jobs, and I'm just curious about what your plans or ideas might be for actively promoting this idea of the college isn't for everyone, but everyone has a right to post-secondary education, and we do need people in career and technical education. And I did read in the paper today that your discussion yesterday at Kirkwood, the opponent talked about going around and helping students who are interested. But I'm thinking there's young people who may not know what the options are and who feel beaten down because they can't go to college. So I want to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, I think we're doing a number of things that work, but we're not doing it in a large enough and a way for it to be truly impactful. So I believe that we need to make a lot more of that 4th year of high school. And this is hard to do, though, because the culture in academic circles, especially in K-12, is that it's all about college readiness. As governor, we set a goal of improving college and career readiness by 25% by the time kids are done with their high school. So this is what I would envision. I would envision us getting to a place on our horizon, Pat, how are you, in the not too distant future, where every kid that graduates from high school not only has a high school diploma that's worth something, but also has some college credit, ideally a year of it, that can transfer up, and also has a certificate and a skill that's actually in demand in that economy where they're living and going to school. And I believe our federal government can help fund this movement a lot of times the reason why the places that need it the most, our poorest jurisdictions, have the least of it is because it's expensive to make this change, and it's also sometimes more expensive to bring in the people that can do these, that can teach these sort of technical skills. But it's something we have to do. The Germans do a lot better job of it than we do. And in my own state, we also had a program we called Skills 2 Compete. 2 being like 2 year, like in a 2-year period of time, you could get the skills you need to compete in high demand areas in our workforce. So that's what I would like to see us do, is have a national initiative that helps the K-12 systems move in this direction. And I believe that where it's particularly acute is in our poorer jurisdictions, because the only shot a lot of those kids have of ever going to college is if they're able to work as soon as they come out. Yes, sir.
A question about
Students in here.
Islamophobia, etc. It seems to me right now that Cruz and Trump have seized the initiative of kind of setting the narrative about hatred toward Muslims, etc. How do we seize that back? Because their arguments are based on fear. They're very powerful at this stage. How do we get it back?
Right. I believe we have to, the truth can defend herself, but she needs to be stated. And so I intend to state the truth every day in this campaign, that we need each other in order to succeed in this fight against ISIL. And because of the nature of this threat, there is no group of Americans that we need more than our Muslim American neighbors. And we're all in this together. And I intend to continue to articulate that. The worst thing that we could do, what plays into ISIL's hands, every bit as much as torturing prisoners, is to frame this in their terms as a battle of Western democracies against Islam. And Donald Trump does that when he says that he wants to issue religious ID cards, when he says he wants to cut off travel for all people who are members of that religion. So I'm going to continue to speak out against it. I believe the president's words the other night were really good on that score. Of course, people are also want to know how we're going to increase the battle tempo to take this fight to them and take away the safe haven they now have in Syria and Iraq. People want to know how we're going to increase our preparedness here in the homeland and our capacities. But I thought the president was very, very good when he talked about our values. Defending our values, and the way we defeat ISIL is not by turning upon one another, but by reinforcing that solidarity that has led us victoriously through many conflicts in the past. Let me get some students in here. Yes, ma'am.
So, my name's Callie.
Okay.
You mentioned your intended effects on raising minimum wage so children and families not to grow up in poverty.
Please stand up so
Sorry.
we can hear your question.
You mentioned your intended effects of raising the minimum wage so children and families don't have to grow up in poverty and all that worry, all those worries. Have you thought about the unintended effects that could come out of that and how you deal with it at all?
Yeah. I mean, I think what you're talking about is if you raise the minimum wage, will it mean that people lay off workers and that there's less employment? Is that what you mean?
Kinda. I don't know the effects. I don't know the effects of what it could have on our economy and on anything, so.
Yeah, there's never been an instance where raising the minimum wage ever led to a drop in employment. You won't find any economist that will be able to actually make the case that in the long arc of our consistently raising the minimum wage to keep it above the poverty line, that it ever led to unemployment. What you will start to see, though, when many cities move ahead of their states and move ahead of their federal government to raise it to $15 an hour as they are in New York or as they are in Seattle, you'll see an affirmation of fair market American capitalism, one of the rules of which is that when workers earn more money, they spend more money, there is stronger consumer demand, and our economy grows. For 30 years we were told this false theory of economics, that if you concentrate wealth at the top, remove regulation everywhere, and keep wages low, that'll eventually create a sort of capital cloudburst that will make investment rain back down on the economy and make jobs come up. And that's not the way it works. Never seen a tassel, I've never seen a stalk of corn grow from the tassel down, have you? So an economy is built from the middle out and from the middle up. And what's made us, the way we've earned the brand of the land of opportunity is because we've practiced that form of economics that says the stronger and more inclusive we make our growing middle class, the more our economy will grow. That's what earned us the brand of the land of opportunity. Think about it. No other nation on the planet has the brand of the land of opportunity. So we've gotten away from keeping the minimum wage above the poverty line. The minimum wage should be a wage on which you can live. We've undervalued labor. We've undervalued our service industry. We've, in many states, enacted laws that prevent workers from bargaining collectively to keep the pressure on upward moving wages. And there's some who say that in a global economy where the amount of labor has doubled in the last 40 years, that we can't do that, or else all these jobs will go to India and other places. I mean, there's certainly things up. The world certainly changed. We have to be mindful of those global effects. However, we also need to be mindful of the circulatory nature of an economy. It's much more of an ecosystem, you know. And if 70% of our economic growth comes from consumer demand, and 70% of us as consumers are earning the same or less than we were 12 years ago, well, it stands to reason we won't have the growth that we otherwise would if wages were going up. So that's, in my own state, we raised our minimum wage to $10.10. We didn't see any run for the borders. Two of our counties raised it to $12.80, and they happen to be two of the most affluent counties in our state, and they're not seeing any of that displacement, even in raising it $12.80. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Jordan. Thanks for coming to Iowa City. Governor O'Malley, in my opinion, we cannot have a serious discussion, an honest discussion about criminal justice reform over police neighborhoods or institutional racism without talking about marijuana reform and the devastating effects of the war on drugs. What will you do as president? And why do you think so many candidates take such a weak position on the issue, such as Hillary Clinton?
Look, in my own state, and even as a prosecutor, I can't remember a time, perhaps there was one, I can't remember a time when I went to the mat and put up a case and tried it on a possession of marijuana case. I just wouldn't have taken away from the other, given the nature of the district where I was a prosecutor. So in my own state, we decriminalized the possession of marijuana. I have traveled to Colorado, and I met with a lot of their state officials that are charged with tracking and monitoring and this new direction that Colorado's taken on adult use of marijuana. And I think that I think we should all be open to a conversation about this and be guided by what reduces harm. And if a policy reduces harm to human beings, that should be determinative of the direction that we head. If it increases harm, then maybe we should reconsider our approach. In my own state, in my own city, even through 7 years as being mayor, I never ever once, though I was out in our poorest and hardest hit neighborhoods every day and every night, I never once had a citizen ever say to me, "Mayor, my neighborhood is over-policed. We want to have less police in our neighborhood." I often had people say to me they want the police to be more responsive, they want the police to be more courteous, they want the police to be more thorough, they want the police to be more professional. But I never ever had a citizen in any of our poorest neighborhoods ever tell me they wanted fewer police in their neighborhood. In fact, on the contrary, the most frequent request I got was for more police rather than less, given the fact that we had allowed our poorest neighborhoods to become, in essence, occupied by 24/7 open-air drug markets. I put forward a plan more broadly on criminal justice reform, a new agenda for criminal justice reform for our country. I gave that address at the Urban League about 2 months ago. It's online, and it's informed by 15 years of experience. So that's how I feel, though, on your issue of marijuana. I also passed in my state twice, because the first time It was unworkable. But I passed medical marijuana as a governor in my state and signed it into law. Yes, sir.
So since the war on terror began,
Are you from Chicago?
yes, sir.
I could tell.
Since the war on terror began, every single day, 22 veterans have ended their own life. And if you do the numbers, that death count pales in comparison to what the actual war on terror is. And so what would you do to stop this mental health epidemic that's affecting our heroes when they come home?
Yeah, we need to do a much better job. We talked about reentry in terms of criminal justice. We've got a reentry crisis when it comes to our men and women in uniform reentering civilian life. We do a very, very poor job of the transition. So poor that a lot of our veterans coming back with all of the effects that combat veterans come home with, they become ghost people out there. They become lost. And we don't do a very good job of handling that transfer and that pass-off. Are you a veteran?
Yeah,
The DD-214?
it's all signed off. Got the,
Mhm.
I got it. So.
That's your form. But on that form, our veterans have to sign off on when they leave service and are supposed to then be able to receive the care they need from our VA or from our state veterans administrations. There's not a box on that where they can even put their email address. So our own state VA became almost like a detective bureau trying to find these guys when they come home. One of the goals I have set is for us to have full employment for veterans within the next, I think I have a 5-year goal on that one. I think that's the portal for the better delivery of services, whether it's physical health or mental health or what have you. There's a need throughout our government, and especially in the VA, to transform them into much more open and transparent organizations. There's not an excuse for, if there's choke points with specialized care where there's long waiting lines, veterans should be able to access that care immediately someplace else. But the handoff, the pass-off, is almost non-existent from the Department of Defense to the VA or to state VAs, and we need to fix that. And the mental health treatment is a big part of it. But I think, in my experience in working on this, and by the way, we set this goal of full employment in our state, not because we were doing well, but because we were losing a lot of people and seeing people showing up in our jails, which is another place to make a connection, right?
We've seen quite a few brain injury people.
Yeah, a lot of brain injury people coming home.
They're winding up in the criminal justice.
Right, which a lot of the, I have found that a lot of these problems, the solution is smarter and more connections. We lose the connection between Defense Department and VA, connection between jails and mental health, connections between mental health and employment. The best places I've found to reach our veterans are actually the one-stop career centers that we maintain in a lot of places, if we have veterans right there. And that's what we use as a point of access. But in all of this, we need to operate by way of, here's one other way to look at it. Look, if you can do your banking online, if you can do retail online, if you can do so many other things online, why is it that our veterans, who have given more for our country than any other group of professionals, why is it that they can become so lost when they come home? Not with technology.
Yeah.
Okay, we got time for one more. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
My name's Kate.
My wife's name is Kate.
I was just wondering if you have a plan to improve the quality and quantity of mental health.
Yeah, I think we need to constantly work on it and bring it up to a better parity. It varies greatly from state to state, and our federal government needs to somehow find a way to keep states in the game and keep their skin in the game, as we do with some other programs like Medicaid. In my own state, I increased public access to, or rather, access to public mental health services by 80% when I was governor, even through a recession. But other states have made different choices. So I guess that's more of an intention than a plan. My intention is to dial up the parity in mental health service, and which also means increasing reimbursement rates, and also doing it mindful of some greater distances, and it's a real challenge in rural areas to find adequate numbers of mental health providers. Okay. Hey, look, I really appreciate you all coming here. There are 55 days left until the caucuses. And I know you're Iowans, and most of you don't make up your mind until the last 2 weeks. I've seen this happen before. And then the Rubik's Cube of discernment and decision starts this again. And so in the meantime, though, I want to introduce Ben Kramer. Ben, come on up, Ben. Ben is our organizer. He got the plum assignment, Iowa City. And what you don't know about Ben, though, he's a very hard worker, but if he goes home at night without signing up at least 20 more people to commit to caucus for O'Malley, he cries himself to sleep. So I need your help. I really appreciate you coming here today. There's not a doubt in my mind that our country's looking for new leadership. And it's important for our country's future that America find that new leadership in our party. That's why I'm running. I need your help. And I thank you so much for coming out.
Hi everyone, my name is Abby Schulte, and I'm Megan Adams. I'm Kylie Tennis, and we're Kyoto Sociology. We're really excited for this event today, so can we please give a warm welcome to former Mayor of Baltimore and former Governor of Maryland, Martin O'Malley.
All right, let's give it up for Kylie, Megan, and Abby. It's wonderful to be with all of you. Am I getting you out of class, or is this after school? Some of this class? Out of class. And gosh, you guys are still here. Well, look, thank you very, very much. It's a great honor to be here with all of you. And this is not my first time to Keokuk County. My first Dave's campaign, who had been counted out a dozen times before, suddenly beating expectations and finishing second in Iowa, and then was off to the races. His name was Gary Hart, and that year was 1984. And the front runner of the year was Walter Mondale. But it's a very cool thing about where you guys live. You see, for all the big money in our politics, and for all of the pundits, and for all of supposedly really smart people in Washington, they tell you how the election's supposed to turn out. The people in Iowa always make up their own minds. And the polls can never ever figure it out until it's actually caucus night. So in other words, I think one of the coolest things about your state is that here the individual person really matters. And every individual voter matters. And that's why the caucuses are so exciting. And you guys perform a tremendous service to the rest of the country. Because in your state, what I've noticed is people insist on meeting each of the presidential candidates 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times before they make up their mind. And that's a tremendous service to our country. So let me share some thoughts with you. Let me begin also by acknowledging the presence here of the county chair of Democratic County Chair of Keokuk County, and that is Mary Creer, who is with us right here. Mary, thank you for being here. And I also want to acknowledge the presence here of one of the great state senators here in the state of Iowa, and he is your state senator, and he is Kevin Kinney. Senator Kinney, good to see you.